This episode is brought to you by the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook, the first beautifully designed, fully customizable paper charting workbook designed with you in mind. With 3 years worth of charting pages, the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook has you covered. If you've been looking for a solid alternative to charting apps, you'll love this charting workbook. The Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Workbook is available in both Fahrenheit and Celsius editions, and it's available in spiral-bound, paperback, and ebook versions. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/workbook to order your copy today. That's fertilityfriday.com/workbook. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 338. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with us today. I'm excited to share today's episode with you. Today, I am welcoming back Laura Schoenfeld to the show. Laura was one of my very first guests back in episode number 12. So if you haven't listened all the way back, or if you're a newer listener, certainly head back and listen to episode 12. So fertilityfriday.com/12. So in that episode, we talked about post-birth control syndrome. And to be honest, it's an episode that I refer to quite a bit when I'm asked questions about just birth control, what to do, how to kind of minimize some of the challenges coming off of it. It's really still to this day, even though 6 years later, an excellent, informative episode. In today's episode, we're talking about hypothalamic amenorrhea, HA, and we also get into some of the changes that Laura has made to her business recently. So Laura is now regularly coaching health professionals, primarily nutrition professionals. And so she shares just tons of wisdom, lots of great information, and also lots of practical information for how to manage your cycles, particularly if you are having really irregular cycles or you've lost your period altogether. As a specialist trained in functional medicine nutrition therapy, she's helped hundreds of women optimize their hormone and gut health while allowing for flexibility in their diet and lifestyle choices. Drawing on her background as a teaching assistant and mentor for the Kresser Institute's Adapt Functional Practitioner Training Program, Laura has coached dozens of dietitians and nutritionists on how to grow their business for financial success. And so let's jump into today's conversation with Laura. So I'm excited to have Laura Schoenfeld back on the show. She was actually one of my very, very first guests, which I remember fondly back in the day. That was when you were working for Kresser, and I remember you had this really awesome blog on coming off of hormonal birth control, and I still refer people to that podcast pretty regularly, which may surprise you because it was almost 6 years ago, I think.
I was going to say, it's been a while.
Yeah. But welcome back to the show. And in the intro, what I shared is that you've made some significant pivots in your business, which has been really exciting to see. And so you're doing less client work these days, more business work, supporting entrepreneurs, specifically still in the field though, because then I think you focus mostly on nutritionists, but you can maybe share a little bit about, what actually brought you into the field initially in the field of hormone health, and then what helped you to kind of pivot into what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, gosh, that's I'm trying to think, probably a 10-year journey we're looking at this point. So I'll try to condense it down. I would say, I feel like this is pretty typical for most entrepreneurs that their area of interest at least somewhat relates to their own experience or their own story. I didn't really have like significant hormone issues growing up in high school and all of that. I had a relatively normal cycle as far as I remember. Honestly, I don't even think I was paying attention. And as I was getting into college and grad school, and as my stress levels were going up, as I started to engage in some less healthy behaviors like dieting and excessive exercise and kind of on that constant like weight loss, weight regain cycle that I think a lot of women in their 20s go through because they have this idea of what they want to look like and they try to like force their body to look like that. And maybe it works for a couple months, but then it's not sustainable and then you kind of rebound. So I definitely went through all of that probably I think I first started dieting in like sophomore year of high school. And it was totally random. It was like slim fast at lunch or something like that. It wasn't something where I was doing anything disordered or anything like that. But as time went on, I was just constantly experimenting with different diets. I did low carb for a while. I did like those fiber crackers for a while, which that was not, it was effective, but not necessarily the healthiest thing. And I think my hormones, for obvious reasons, did not like that. And I started to experience a lot more hormonal issues, a lot more PMS, a lot more cramping, more mood swings, more fatigue. Like I said, my weight was kind of going up and down within maybe like a 20-pound range. So I felt like my body was not in control, and I'm kind of a little bit of a control freak. I hate to admit it. And so I was always trying to figure out like, what's wrong? How do I fix this? What's the right diet to follow? I got really invested in the paleo community for a few years, and that's how I'm connected with Kresser, and it's how a lot of people started to get to know me in 2012 to 16 kind of range. And I feel like I got really dogmatic about what was the right diet to follow and was really, really passionate about it. And again, even though I was being really strict with my diet, I don't think I was as healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually as I am now. And that's because I was so laser focused on perfection and really bordering on the orthorexia spectrum. Like I said, I never really got any sort of serious health issues from it, but definitely was like very black and white about food. And anytime I would let myself have something fun or like kind of let myself go at a party or something, I would really just binge and I would feel sick afterwards. And so in my mind, like intellectually, I understood nutrition. I went to grad school, got my degree in dietetics, and I got a master's in public health. So I understood all this stuff from my intellectual perspective, but I think I still had that low self-confidence, body image kind of issues that were affecting what I thought was right and what I thought I should be doing with my nutrition. And again, it just was manifesting as a lot of hormone issues, quote unquote, adrenal fatigue kind of stuff. So I was really into adrenal fatigue for a while as well as like an area of interest from a professional perspective. And it was frustrating because I felt like I should be able to fix it because I know better, quote unquote. But I think what really for me shifted the way that my body is operating, the way that my hormones are operating, the way that I feel on a day-to-day basis was more of the mindset and spiritual side of the equation rather than the food and the exercise piece. So I just got really passionate in helping other women that were dealing with that kind of perfectionist tendencies, the belief that they had to be quote unquote perfect with their diet, their attraction to restrictive dieting, to fad diets, that kind of thing, to over exercising. I used to do CrossFit. I used to do like boot camp style workouts, and when I was in college, I was working out like 2 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. So I was, helping other people get out of what I had been in when I was in my 20s. And then over time started to realize that again, it was way bigger than just food and exercise and supplements and all of that, and started to get really interested in learning more about mindset, self-image, negative self-talk, problematic beliefs. And a lot of that actually played into my development as an entrepreneur as well. So as I continued on that path, I just started getting more and more interested in the way that our mindsets and the way that our thought processes affect the physical reactions we have to the behaviors that we're doing, and even the way that our behaviors are driven by our identity, by our beliefs about ourselves, and how that actually manifests in physical challenges or physical health. So it's been a really interesting journey. And like I said, a lot of it has come from my own personal experience, growing my own business over the last 7+ years and working for Kresser, helping him grow his business, and just realizing like how interconnected all of this stuff is. And just really, I'm a very multi-passionate person. So this year's been an exercise in cutting down and narrowing my focus and really just trying to get really good at one thing rather than trying to help everybody with every single thing they could possibly be dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for taking us essentially through a good decade of figuring out where you want to be. And it's so funny when you're in the interviewer's chair and someone does take you through that period of time, because this is really this long kind of windy process of growth and development. And you said a few things that I want to touch on, of course. And I think a big thing is the perfectionist piece. And what I think you highlighted in your own experience and journey is that we're all kind of looking to get to this place. Like, so just kind of go with me for a second. But it's like this place where we feel happy and content, where we're healthy. So physically we feel good, emotionally we feel good, spiritually we feel fulfilled. And it's kind of like this place that I think a lot of us are trying to get to. And certainly I don't talk about my kind of the business side of things on the podcast at all. But when I think about what my role is for the women that I serve, the women that I work with, my clients, the listeners, I really think that I'm helping them on that same path. And so for many women, it is through the menstrual cycle that really helps them to connect to that better health, that kind of better emotional state, and even the spiritual, because if it's out of order, then the cycle's out of order. So I think for a lot of women, it's that, but it's essentially that same path. So the question out of that I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure you've seen it too, so many women struggle with this idea that everything has to be perfect all the time. The diet has to be perfect. The charting, from my perspective, has to be perfect. The cycle has to be perfect. And even though for example, the charting method that I teach, it's very detailed and very specific, and you can go down that road if you want. But I'm kind of holding these two things with each client. Like, yes, it's helpful to have these details, but we also want to allow for just being a human being and recognizing that there is no perfect. So yeah, still trying to make my way to the question, but the question I wanted to ask out of that was, when it came to, like, when you think back about the desire for perfection and for everything to be just so, and for your body and for your life and for your career, everything to just be perfect, where does that come from? Where do you think it comes from?
That could be like a whole podcast in and of itself. So I'll try to keep it short. I feel like for me, where it came from, and I definitely am not 100% detached from that. I still am constantly like, vigilant about not letting myself go down that road again. Because even as an entrepreneur, it's easy to kind of have those same behaviors show up in the way that you run your business, even if your way that you operate with your body is good. But I think for me, a lot of that stuff came from the desire to be accepted, the desire to be liked, the desire to be seen as valuable, worthy, like all of those things that it was very much external, wanting other people's recognition, love, that kind of thing. And I can definitely see very clearly when I look back at my own journey to this point. I'm 33 now. So it's not like I'm like, looking back on my whole life, but just to the last like decade or so, so many of my problematic behaviors and negative emotions and tough times in my life, they became that way because I was so focused on trying to prove myself to others. And I was super shy as a kid. I was kind of like a wallflower. I went to prom by myself. Like, I was not super confident when I was growing up. And I always felt like there was something not good enough about me, or something like there was some reason why I wasn't popular, or I didn't have a boyfriend, like that kind of stuff. And I was always trying to figure out, like, what is it that's going to make me good enough so that I have friends, so that I have a boyfriend, like all of those things. So it's been really interesting. And for me, the journey is very attached to my becoming a Christian in 2012. So that spiritual journey for me, like seeing myself through God's eyes and understanding who I am, like as a created being, as opposed to somebody who's just trying to be something to everybody else. That was a pretty pivotal moment for me to really start shifting things. But I don't know if I'm really answering your question right now, but I think a lot of times, I don't think I'm the only one that has felt this way, that the pursuit of perfection is because we want to be acceptable or approved by others, or we want to feel valuable to others. Because a lot of times, like if we didn't care what other people thought, we wouldn't do these things, right? Like we're not naturally like, I need to have the perfect diet for my own happiness. We think it's going to really get us something external. So a lot of it for me was desiring that external validation. And once I learned to not only self-validate, but also to have God's validation, like that really was like the pivotal experience for me to start actually changing these behaviors, changing these beliefs, and having something to ground those belief changes in. Because it's a little hard when you're just like, I'm just going to not care what people think anymore, because it is difficult. We live in a society that there's a lot of pressure to care what other people think, to be successful, to look successful, to dress in a way that looks like you're successful, all of that. And I think a lot of women fall into it, and it causes them to constantly be looking outside of themselves for what they actually could be getting within, even with the cycle stuff. Like I think for me, I track loosely as far as my cycle goes, but I think for me, a lot of it is a lot more intuitive and being able to get in touch with my body. You know, if something's out of whack, I know very quickly. I don't need a chart to tell me that something's a little off, and I can go back to, okay, what are the behaviors that might be causing that? Why was my period a week late? Like looking back, oh yeah, I was kind of high stress. I wasn't sleeping as well. I was drinking more alcohol. Like that was the last couple of weeks. I'm going to kind of reset a little bit, get back to my normal routine that actually does work for me. And I am pretty consistently able to see that reflected in my menstrual cycle. So I usually look at the menstrual cycles more of an indicator of how are things in your life. Because if we're eating well, and when I say eating well, I don't mean eating perfectly, I mean nourishing our bodies appropriately. If we're getting appropriate amounts of exercise, not too much, not too little. If we're dealing with our stress, if we're meeting with our friends, like especially female relationships, I think can play a huge role. If we're in a relationship with another person from like a partner perspective, how's our relationship there? Is that like a safe, trusting, loving relationship? Or is that like super stressful and there's a lot of fighting going on? So I think the menstrual cycle is so amazing. And I think it's really cool that we have that as a woman to be able to tell us if something's off, as opposed to looking at it and trying to say, I need to do the menstrual cycle perfectly, and I need to take the perfect supplements, and I need to chart perfectly, and all of that. It's more zooming out and kind of looking at the full picture and saying, what could be influencing my cycle, and kind of having more of that intuitive ability to check in with yourself and being honest with yourself about what might be influencing it. So I know that was a totally all over the place answer, but it just kind of, my brain just like went to a bunch of different places.
No, I think it was a perfect answer, because it really alludes to how big of a topic this is. Like you were right when you said it could be the topic of a podcast, because the question of where does it come from is a big one. And there's a lot of different directions that we could take it. And I think a few interesting kind of thoughts to ponder, not that we're going to have all the answers to all the problems of the world, but where does it come from? I mean, I remember being in my early years of university. So they were obviously, they left a mark, let's just say. But I remember learning about things I didn't know. I remember being 18 or something like that and learning about airbrushing. Now, this might sound silly to many women listening, but when I was 18, particularly when I was a teenager, I used to buy like Teen People and read those magazines and stuff. And I didn't know that the models were airbrushed. And I didn't know that like they, made the pictures look like they didn't have pores in their face, and that they cut off parts of their leg to make their legs look like little batons. So I remember being very much like impressionable and being young and looking at those magazines and thinking that my legs were big, and I was a pole, like I was a bean pole when I was in high school. And I remember feeling that pressure, and I did grow out of it. And so in my case, I didn't ever like stop eating. I was very active and I was always hungry. So I always ate all the food, but I was still a bean pole. And I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying this because this was my experience, but I was still concerned. So my point in sharing this was that I was a skinny little beanpole and I was still concerned. And I wasn't doing a lot of exercise because I got a lot of exercise in with my sports and I did ballet and all this stuff. But I would still like sometimes sit in front of the TV and like do crunchies because I wanted my stomach to be really flat. So kind of fast forwarding this, because this is when we're talking about periods and kind of under eating, and obviously we're hinting at this, and the issues around hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is there's just very certain threads that come through it. And one of those threads is that we move from an intuitive place of taking care of ourselves and thinking about food as nourishment and thinking about our health like it matters. And even understanding, of course, that our menstrual cycle is sharing important information. And we move from all of that to this place of the food becomes part of a goal to achieve a body type. And it's so disconnected from what's actually happening in your physical body. So maybe share just that struggle, because you had your own experience with a bit of that, but also you've worked with a number of women who've experienced that. And of course, it spills over into other areas when you're super type A, which I feel like I can call out because I am too. And you want everything to be perfect.
Well, I'm not type A. Come on.
Not at all. But like, it's so interesting, right? Because you end up active. No one's doing it to you, right? No one is preventing you from eating food. There are people in this world who, when their kids, if their families maybe they're struggling financially, where it's no fault of their own that they're not able to get enough food. But we're talking about, in a world of plenty, when you're opting to basically do something that is harmful to yourself. So loaded question here, right? But what have you seen that it kind of prevents us from, or women in those situations? Like what is that about?
Yeah. And honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is identity. Really, that was the word that pops into my mind when you're asking that question. I never lost my period, but I was going like 40 to 60 days in between cycles. So, I mean, that's might as well have lost my period, right? And I work with a lot of women who have lost their period, or it's very, very inconsistent, like, 6 months in between cycles, that kind of thing. And I think the biggest challenge because I run a program called Get Your Period Back, and I think it's a pretty straightforward program as far as like the steps to take. And if they implement, it's very successful. And the people that tend to struggle the most, in my experience, are the ones that have their identity wrapped up in being the fit one or looking a certain way. Or, if their clothes start to get a little tight, they freak out and then they go back to their old behaviors. So it's that identity of your body being, first of all, maybe the most important thing about you, even if you don't most people don't consciously say that their body is the most important thing. But I always want to ask, like, okay, well, what are your behaviors reflecting? Like, what does your schedule reflect is the most important thing to you? And if you're spending all your time at the gym, planning your meals, cooking, meal prep, reading fitness magazines, scrolling Instagram, looking at fitness accounts, like if that's what your day looks like, then I'm going to say that that's your biggest priority. And I don't think our body should be our biggest priority. Now, there's seasons for focusing and putting energy in and putting attention towards learning and being educated and making changes. But we're not talking about like a 3 to 6 month period of time where you're learning how to do things differently. We're talking about a lifestyle where it's that obsessive focus around what does my body look like and what are the behaviors I'm doing or the habits that I'm doing that are going to control my body. So again, it comes down to what identity are you latching on to as being the most important definition of who you are? And if you were to lose that, if that were to be taken from you, what's the emotional response? Because like I said, a lot of women, the reason that they struggle with recovering from HA is because they don't want to give up that identity as the fit one or the one with the six pack, or, because a lot of them, their friends are like, oh, Jenny's the fit one. Like they'll say that kind of thing, or they'll go out to eat and they're eating their salad and their friends are like, oh, Hannah, you're so controlled. You're so good with your diet. I wish I could be like you. And that's powerful. Like when somebody says to you, I wish I could be like you. Oh, wow, you're so good at XYZ. It's so easy to take that on and say, well, that's who I am. I'm the clean eater. I'm the super fit one. I'm the exerciser. And unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, for HA, a lot of those behaviors have to be radically changed. They don't, I don't teach 100% exercise elimination, but there are some major changes that I recommend for exercise for someone with HA, especially if they're doing like 5 days a week of CrossFit or like running marathons, that kind of thing. And making those changes, the behavior change itself is not that hard, because honestly, a lot of times it's just doing less, and doing less is not actually harder, right? If you think about, you don't have to find more time to do less. You don't have to put more energy into doing less. Like the actual physical 3D action is not harder. The hard part is the mindset and letting yourself make these changes and letting yourself let go of the identity that you've built around those behaviors. So I know that was kind of a long-winded way of saying I really think identity is the key to making these changes. And if your identity is connected to the diet that you follow, like if you're like, I'm a vegan or I'm paleo or I'm keto, like that, you're saying that you are your diet and that's your identity. And that is something, or even with exercise, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm a runner, like that's creating your, like who you are as being based in your food and exercise choices. So that tends to be the issue that I think most people that struggle have a problem overcoming, because again, eating more food, exercising less, or doing more restful type of activities or getting more downtime, like that's not actually harder to do than exercising 7 days a week or being on the super restrictive diet. So that's my perspective. And I think identity plays a role in all of our choices and our behaviors and the things that we're experiencing in life. So HA is not, special. It's definitely related to how we see ourselves and how we're defining who we are based on the behaviors that we're doing.
Ooh, that's really deep. I know that you do this, or you did this all the time. And so it feels, I don't know how it feels, but I would imagine that it feels similar to when I talk about the menstrual cycle. It just kind of rolls off the tongue and you're kind of blowing people's minds, but this is just what I do. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but I think that's huge. And I honestly haven't really thought about it in that exact way ever. And when you were talking about just those boxes that we put ourselves in initially, but then our friends and our family and everybody then puts us in, this is huge. So I think like even having a particular type of diet, whether you identify like I eat a paleo diet, I am a vegetarian, I am a pescatarian, I am a vegan. When you identify with those labels, like when you were talking, because I've also had a few interviews, not very many, but a few interviews with ex-vegans, for example. And that's a huge thing, because then everyone in their circle identifies them as the vegan, as the one that doesn't eat the meat. And so it's like, it feels like it's going to be just this never-ending huge world shifting event if you go out with your friends and have a piece of chicken. And the irony is that yeah, your friends might be like, oh, wow, you're eating chicken now. But it's not going to be like no one is dreaming about you every night and thinking about you 24/7 to the point that it's going to just change their whole world if you eat a piece of chicken. But I could see that feeling like it's going to be this huge thing if you change the way that you have been for a while. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that really struck me.
And I will say, there is a possibility that relationships will drop off when you make these changes, right? Like, I'm not going to pick on vegans, but I've definitely seen some angry vegans out there. And I could imagine if you're a vegan and you're thinking of not being a vegan anymore and all of your friends are vegan and it's very like ethical veganism, and kind of heavy air quotes on that. And all of a sudden now you're a murderer because you're eating chicken, right? So I do think that there could be some relationships that drop out. If you're someone I'm the CrossFitter that goes every day to CrossFit. I've had clients before say, like my friends, I'll come back to CrossFit because I'm dropped down to twice a week. And they'll be like, where have you been? Why aren't you coming anymore? And it's like, there is some of that pushback. And so I don't want people to have this potentially false expectation that making these changes, like nobody cares and nobody's going to say anything, because actually it does happen. And sometimes it's just like an initial reaction and it's more out of curiosity. Like someone's like, wait, why aren't you going to, we used to see you every day at CrossFit. Why aren't you coming anymore? And you can be honest and say, well, actually, I think it wasn't working super well for my hormones. So I'm dropping back to only 2 days a week because it seems like that's working better for me. And you can be honest about it, right? But there are situations where there will be relationships that change, and that's okay, right? We don't want to be in a situation where we are harming ourselves or forcing ourselves to live in a way that does not work for us anymore, just to maintain relationships that probably shouldn't be there anyway. If a relationship is good for you, you changing your diet or exercise routine should not change that relationship. If it does change the relationship, then the relationship's probably not a good relationship to be in anymore. And I can say with like 100% confidence that as I have gotten more clear about who I am, what I care about, what my values are, what I put my time and energy into, I have like the best relationships I've ever had in my life. And there's ones that have dropped out, and that's okay. And it just has to be something where you're not like death gripping the relationships that you have and being so fearful that, oh my gosh, if I start to be the person that I actually think I should be from like a behavior and belief perspective, if I lose those relationships, it's actually okay. And it's part of that process of shedding the old identity that wasn't working for you anymore. So I just wanted to make that point because I don't think most people care. Like, I hope that most people don't care what you're eating and what your exercise routine is and all of that, but some do. And sometimes you do have to lose some toxic relationships if they care more about what you're eating than whether or not you're taking care of yourself.
Well, I really appreciate that perspective as well, because I can think because when I was saying that, that's what I think, right? Like that at that point in time, because that's what would make sense to me. But I'm also almost 40, and my friend circle, I mean, honestly, like it's what you said, like my friend circle, I can say I've got good people around me at this point in my life. So I could do what I need to do, and no one's going to be like, I'm not friends with you anymore.
Yeah.
You're eating chicken. But I don't want to minimize it. And so I'm really glad that you made that point, because as soon as you said that, I realized that for everyone's in a different situation. Everyone is at a different age group. Everyone is surrounded by different people. And some people are super intense about their beliefs and super, super attached, even more so than you are, to those identities, air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really important. And perhaps my lack of perspective here just reflects the fact that I typically, just the way that I've kind of moved through life, I'll try things, I'll kind of try on a this or that, but I have never committed to a diet or to a this or a that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recommend, and any clients who are listening, like I don't recommend any diet, air quotes. I talk about adding in foods that are helpful for fertility, and I talk about the specific reasons why, what maybe gearing one way to the next. I had an interesting conversation with a client. If she's listening, she's going to smile, because she had a really positive experience with switching to keto for a period of time because she had some particularly intense insulin resistance issues. So for her, it was actually really helpful. And she kind of suggested, like, maybe you should do that, like talk about keto for everyone. And so I took it as an opportunity to share that everyone is different. And so this is why when you're learning when you're a nutritionist or naturopath or an MD or anybody who is in the health field, you have to go to school to learn that everybody, and then school, but then you also have to have professional experience to show you that everybody is not the same. Mm-hmm. Everybody is not you. And there's no one size fits all for anybody. Anyways, but I'm kind of going off track, but bringing it back to what you mentioned, that's huge. And that could be a really difficult time, particularly if you really have been eating a certain way, moving in a certain way for a period of time, and really built a lot of friendships around that identity. So I want to go back to something that you said, because I feel like when you said it, there would have been a lot of women being like, what do you mean? When you said
that happens a lot. People are like, what are you talking about?
Well, so I'm not necessarily quoting, but you said something to the effect of like, your body shouldn't be the most important thing. Mm. And I feel like that because if you build your whole identity friend circle around CrossFit, which is one type of exercise and a whole world of things you could be doing, or if you build your friendships and relationships around like, I don't eat meat, or I, do
only eat meat.
Whatever. So, I mean, imagine that, right? Like, so yeah, share a little bit more about that, because I think for a lot of women who are listening are really focused on their bodies right now, are really focused on their menstrual cycles, and are really wanting to figure this out. And so I totally relate to what you said about seasons of life. But I think there's probably plenty of women who are listening who would be like, what do you mean it's not the what if it's not the most important thing, Laura? What is?
Well, and I have a lens, right? I mentioned before that I'm a Christian, so that's the lens that I am looking at things through. So everybody's going to have their own perspective on what's important, and I don't want to ever say what somebody's priority should be, right? I think we all need to be really clear about our own values, about what really is important to us. For some people that's family, for some people that's their career. Like as with the faith being such a, I mean, it's really the biggest part of my life as far as like the way it touches everything that I do. I feel like for me, it all comes back to my relationship with God and my relationship with the people in my life. And so anything that I do with like nutrition or exercise or sleep, stress, all of the stuff that's more of the behavior stuff for physical self-care, it's always stemming from a desire to have, and I'm trying to think of how to explain this because now I'm going to get kind of woo-woo, but like, I really want that clarity of mind, clarity of energy. Like, I want to feel really good in my body so that I can connect with God more easily, and I can connect with others more easily, and I can serve the people that I'm working with as best as possible. So that's been what's really driving any decisions I'm making around my health in the last, I don't know, a couple years. More recently, and I'm like a little afraid to admit this publicly, but more recently I've been thinking, okay, we probably need to start looking at having kids soon, because I am 33, my husband's 40. And so now I'm starting to get curious about what kind of behaviors from a food, lifestyle, even work schedule, like what kind of behaviors need to change so that I can start to transition into that preparation. Been reading some really cool books about it, like just getting that slow move towards knowing that that's important to me, and knowing that family and like legacy and that kind of thing is the stage of life that I feel like I'm moving into. So all of that said, food and exercise, like I still care about it, right? Like it's not like I'm saying don't think about it and just eat whatever you want and don't care about your exercise, all of that. But it's the same thing. Like I care about brushing my teeth, right? Like I'm not obsessed about my dental health. I'm not like every day checking, what do my teeth look like? Are they white enough? Are they strong enough? Do I have cavities? Do they hurt? How do they feel? Like I'm not laser focused on my teeth, obsessing about my teeth, but I still brush them every day and I still floss relatively frequently. I don't do it every day, but I floss when I remember, kind of thing. And so the behavior of brushing my teeth, it's just part of my routine because I care about my teeth, but I'm not obsessed about my teeth.
I wanted to pop in with a quick message from today's sponsor, Audible. Did you know that you can listen to The Fifth Vital Sign for free when you sign up for a 30-day trial with Audible? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/audible for details. That's fertilityfriday.com/audible. Now let's jump back into today's episode.
So the same thing with my body. Like I care about my body. I care about how I feel. I know how I feel is very important to the way that I can walk through every single day and show up the way I want to show up. But it's not the thing that I'm focused on. So all of my health behaviors have the purpose of furthering my relationship with God and relationship with my just people, right? So it really does become this thing where you don't have to be thinking about it all the time. You'll know, like I know if something's not working, like I know if I don't feel my best, I know if my period's late, I know if I am feeling more tired, or I'm not like big into like weight loss and stuff, but if my clothes start to get kind of tight, I'm like, okay, I'm probably not doing a lot of like positive behaviors if I'm starting to see these changes. So I can reassess, say, okay, what have I been doing? What needs to change? Usually it's just little tweaks here and there. Like even with quarantine, I had been drinking a lot more alcohol than I would ever usually drink. And it's just because it's like the first couple months of quarantine, you're like, well, I guess this is life right now. Like, let's just tolerate it. And then now 6 months later, I'm like, okay, maybe this isn't changing anytime soon. I can't just like drink wine every night, right? So making those little shifts just because I know like, hey, I want to feel my best. And there's certain behaviors that like drinking wine, even a glass of wine every night, not really contributing to my overall energy, mental clarity, ability to connect with my clients, my husband, my friends, all of that. I just make the little shift. And it's not like I'm like white knuckling, oh my gosh, I can't have alcohol right now. It's more just like, it's not really working for you. I'm just going to like take a break and get rid of that for a little bit of time. So I'm saying this because I know that this is possible for everybody to get to this place. And part of it is letting go of the level of attention, level of focus, and level of obsession around your body and really zooming out and saying, what actually is valuable to me? What do I want to look at when I'm like 90 years old and like looking back on my life? Like, what do I want to look at and say, I'm so glad that I put my time and energy into that. That was so valuable. I'm really happy with the way that I live my life. What comes to mind is that your family, is that your career, is that like your volunteer work, whatever that is, putting your time and energy into that, and then looking at your health and physical behaviors as being, how do I support the things that matter to me by making these choices? So that's always how I shouldn't say always, that's how I've been looking at it for the last few years. And I find that that really helps a lot of women to get into that sweet spot of like, not just ignoring their body and saying, my body doesn't matter, whatever, I'm not going to care about it and not going to learn about it or not going to do anything differently, but also not in where a lot of women get stuck, especially with HA, in that my body's the most important thing. I have to be laser focused on it. All my free time is spent thinking about it, learning about it, reading about it, implementing things at the gym, doing my meal prep, like looking up recipes, all of that stuff. It doesn't have to be that way for you to actually have good results. So again, I know I tend to like just go all over the place with my answers, but it is something where honestly, as an entrepreneur, I feel like this comes up too, just core values and knowing like, why am I doing all of this? Like, what is the point? And really getting clear about what is the point, and then adjusting the behaviors appropriately to support the point, but not to be the point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that I like it when you meander, Laura, first of all. But no, that's really, I think that this is a really helpful and important conversation. I mean, for any new listeners who aren't as familiar with HA, hypothalamic amenorrhea, I'll certainly make sure to include a lot of the links to previous episodes that do a better job of defining and kind of outlining it in a more structured fashion so that it's easier to follow. But I think that this conversation really helps. That it's exactly kind of that 50,000 foot view, as people would say, where you're really zoning in on it. And I feel like it's a really great moment in time where it's like, what are you actually doing this for? Like, what is this about? And if you have these really clear goals that you've written down, like I'm going to lose X pounds in X days, and this is what, then it's still saying, what is that for? And when you lose that number of pounds and you are a specific number on a scale, what does that entail? And I think you walked a good balance between, because it's not that we don't care about our bodies or our weight or our health, but if you're obsessed with getting a number on a scale, what is the end game here? Because a number on a scale, if that's what it's really down to, like if this is literally the goal, that's not, I think you deserve a better goal, like a bigger goal, a deeper goal. I don't want to crap on your goals, but at the same time, if your goal is just about a number and you haven't given that thought to the bigger picture, like what's really important to you, what's in your heart, what's close to your heart, because that question of like, if the body's not more important, what is? Mm-hmm. I mean, your family, your whatever it is. I can't tell you what it is. For me, I know it's my family. It's kind of, when I think about it, it's my life. So what makes up my life? Well, I need to be able to support myself. For me, it was really important to do something that actually aligns with my values, so that I feel that if I am spending time away from my kids, becoming a mother was a very clarifying moment, because my time was no longer free or just widely available, mm-hmm. because now there are literally humans that depend on me for
for
all
a long
of the
time.
Things. Yes. And so it really forced me to clarify, okay, so if I'm going to spend my time away from my children, what is it that I'm going to be doing? And when you said, when you look back on your life, when you're 90 years old, what do you want to, like, how do you want to feel? And what would make you feel really pleased and proud of how you spent your time? And I'm pretty sure that that puts that perspective in line. So I really love that you shared that. I mean, to shift a little bit into, because I'm really curious about some of your suggestions with all of this in mind for women who are struggling with whether it's lost periods or periods that are really sporadic. And so just the quick overview so you can share a bit more about how you talk about it. When I talk about HA, I share that it's characterized by typically undernutrition, over exercise, and stress. So great storm there, perfect storm to lose your period. And it often, women are more susceptible to it, of course, if they are type A and if they do have that type of personality where we do want everything to be perfect. But I think that it's more than that because we are actively targeted from birth with these images through the media of these skinny, tiny, perfect people who are always smiling and always are happy and always have all these things together and all this kind of stuff. And that's not what that's not what a human being is like. The longer you live, the more you realize that that isn't real at all. You think it's real when you're young. I did. But as you grow up and you live your life, you realize that it's just smoke and mirrors. So in terms of, I mean, combining the emotional aspect of it, which is the biggest hurdle, with the basic aspect of what we can do. Because like you said, it's not harder to exercise less and eat more.
Yeah. And even just with the influence of the media, especially social media, I'm so glad I didn't grow up with like Instagram and stuff. Even if there's no airbrushing and that's literally what the person looks like, I've just gotten to this place where I realize that it doesn't actually even matter. Like, I'm not happier because I look a certain way, or like, I just feel like so much of that, it's funny, the word vanity comes to mind, and I'm not saying that people are bad people, but vanity, the word vain is not just talking about like being obsessed with yourself or narcissistic. It's also defined as like worthless. Right? Like doing something in vain is because it is not valuable. So vanity, and again, this is like, it comes from scripture, but talking about all of the pursuit of wealth and beauty and like all of the things that we think are going to make us happy, it's all vanity, right? It's all in vain. Because even if you get it, it doesn't mean you're going to be happy or feel like you've lived the life you want to live. So whenever I see stuff like that, even though I definitely grew up with like the magazines. I used to have like 5 different magazine subscriptions, and my mom would always get so mad at me because I'd like stack up these like self and women's health and all the different magazines. And she's like, can you throw these out? They're piling up. But I used to look at them being like, oh, if only I could look like that, I'd be so much happier. People would like me more. I'd have a boyfriend, all of that. And now when I see it, I'm like, who cares? Like, I really do not care. Yeah, I like to look nice and I like to like do my hair and stuff like that. But it really is such worthless stuff to pursue. And again, it doesn't mean I don't buy clothes or like, put makeup on. I just realize it doesn't really mean anything. And so to be obsessed or worried about it is so pointless. And I don't want to spend my life worrying about that kind of thing. So I just wanted to make a note of that because I really, and I think you said you're in your 40s. You look like you're in your 20s, but.
Well, 38, not quite.
38. Okay. Well, I actually love being in my 30s. I feel like 30s has been really awesome. And it's been like the decade of like being who I really am rather than trying to be what I think people want me to be. But a lot of women that deal with HA a lot of time are in their 20s and early 30s, and they're still stuck in that I want to be good enough, or I want to be seen as a certain way to other people. So it's either going to take a lot of time for you to get to the same place that Lisa and I are where we're like, I have bigger things to do than worry about what I look like. Or I'm hoping this podcast will inspire you to make that journey a little quicker. But basically just understanding that getting to that place, even if you get there, even if you look like the Instagram model or the, Sports Illustrated cover, there's no guarantee that that's going to do anything positive for your life. And in fact, it could actually make certain things worse in your life. So that's my little side note. But as far as the actual factors that influence a missing or very irregular period, I mean, there's so many when it comes to the actual biochemistry and physiology of it. I break it down into 4 different main silos of attention in the work that I do with my HA clients. I have a protocol called the 4R protocol, and it's refeed, rest, relax, repair. So Refeed is looking at adequate food intake, adequate micronutrients, so vitamins, minerals, just all the things that help your body actually function normally. Because even if you're eating enough calories, it doesn't mean that you're actually nourishing yourself. So that's one of the big issues I see in a lot of the HA world is they're just talking about eat more calories, eat 2,500, eat 3,000. And that's good. But if you're just eating a bunch of junk food to get there, you're not necessarily nourishing your body. And overeating on junk food can also affect ovulation in a negative way. So there are people that stop menstruating because they're eating too many empty calories. So it's not all about under eating. It's eating an appropriate amount of high quality food. And again, enjoying your food. You don't have to eat liver and kale every single meal. And there's room for enjoyment for sure. But the refeed piece is huge because most women that have HA are either macronutrient calorie deficient. And when I say macronutrient, they could be eating enough calories, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're doing keto and they're too low carb and it's not working for them. Or maybe they're too low fat and they can't produce their hormones. And that's why it's not working for them. So calorie and macro deficient or micronutrient deficient, which is vitamins and minerals. So that's the refeed. The rest is, I tend to look at that partially from the exercise piece, making sure that rest is built into a normal workout routine and really cutting back if you're overdoing it or not taking rest days. And then there's also the actual sleep rest piece, right? There's getting enough sleep, taking downtime when you need it, having rest days, having chill time, that kind of thing. And that can even be mental rest too. And actually mental rest is kind of more in the relax. So the relax is more about stress management, relaxing expectations, relaxing not boundaries, but like just how intense you are about the behaviors, being more relaxed about your approach to your body. Because again, you can tap into your intuition and start to trust your body to tell you what it needs, but you do have to relax when it comes to like the rules that you have around food and fitness and your lifestyle. And then the repair piece, that's for anyone who doesn't get their period back from those first 3 steps, which most people do. The repair piece is really looking at things like hypothyroidism or insulin resistance or gut infections, the things that can affect the way that your body's functioning. And a lot of times it comes down to the way that your body's absorbing nutrients or the inflammation levels in your body. So anything that's creating a lot of inflammation or creating a digestive issue can also lead to HA outside of those other 3 things. So those are the 4 silos that I put my recommendations into. And I have found that, again, the first 3 usually tend to be enough for people to get their regular period. And then the 4th one that can be necessary for people that are dealing with a little bit more complicated health issues, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the like 101 on amenorrhea, but that's the protocol that I've developed for my clients. And it works well when people are able to implement. And again, a lot of times the implementation is a challenge when your identity is wrapped up in the old behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like HA is a very, very kind of particular challenge in the sense that it's not a mystery. So there's other types of period issues that are much more challenging to treat, to sort out. If someone has significant gut problem, I've had a number of clients who've had to go to a number of practitioners because they're not able to, they'll do a protocol and it'll help initially and then start getting worse. And so things are, there's other conditions that are very challenging and can take a long time to treat. HA in many ways is very straightforward. If there's not enough consumption of good, healthy, wholesome calories, it's not just about calories, but it's legitimately like if you starve yourself, you can't be healthy. But it represents such a big challenge. And when you were talking about the media and social media you touched on and how you're thankful that you didn't grow up in this time. I mean, I am too, because to date myself, I didn't have my first computer until I went to university. I didn't have my first cell phone until I think it was like year 2, second year. And so I wasn't constantly attached to all my friends. If I had, and I did, mean people at school when I was younger, I left them at school, at the end of the day, and I didn't continue to get abused throughout the night. And there's a lot of things that I would perceive to be abuse that you don't necessarily. And it's so interesting. So because I didn't grow up with it, I recognize that I curate my own content. And my feed is going to look a lot different to Laura's feed. Let's pick on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. But my feed is going to look very, very different because there's a lot of things that I'm just not going to look at, a lot of people that I'm just not going to follow. And the other thing is that sometimes I just wonder, because there was so much I didn't know when I was young. So if you're following a bunch of health influencers that are super skinny and perfect looking all the time, and every picture they're just full makeup, eyelashes, the whole thing. First of all, that's not like that. No one wakes up like that. That takes time. I feel like I'm going to go into like a mini tangent. When I got married, I decided to do all the things like the one time. So I got like the fake nails, like, yes, the toxic ones. I did the fake eyelashes. I did all the things like that one time because I was like, well, let me just try all the things or whatever. And the amount of money, I mean, I did Groupon and stuff, but the amount of money and effort and time that it took for me to actually like do all of the things that one time, I was amazed. Because people do that all the time. Because when I was growing up, I wore fake eyelashes at Halloween.
Yeah.
For fun, legit. And now I see teens wearing it every day and like full makeup.
Contouring, like Kardashian style.
So if anyone does it, so for anyone who isn't aware, I mean, go to YouTube and look up contouring and watch a few of the videos and then go back to your Instagram influencer friend and kind of put this into perspective. Nobody looks like that all the time. And the other thing that I always bring it back to is the menstrual cycle. So when you're seeing these pictures of these skinny, pretty, perfect people, you are not seeing their charts. You don't know if they're on the pill. You don't know if they have a normal menstrual cycle. If they have a menstrual cycle, you don't know if it's regular, if it's consistent, what it's like. And an Instagram picture doesn't give you any insight into what's happening. So it's like moral of the story is in this day and age, with all of this information, we have to be careful who we follow because you don't know. You only know what they put up, on the screen. You just don't know what's going on. And yeah, I think that's where I have to leave it because I don't want to get all preachy, but but it's true though. And so all I can say is when I was a little girl, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that those women do have pores and that was airbrushing. I didn't know that the models, even the movie stars, aren't skinny enough. And in movies, they'll give body doubles because the movie stars aren't even skinny enough. I didn't know that. Did you? And so when you're looking at the Instagram influencers and following all these people and trying to get this perfect body, just know that it doesn't exist. That's the biggest secret.
Yeah. And again, who even cares, right? Like and maybe I'm just super flippant about it now, but I don't know. This year has been very interesting for me to learn so much about media and social media and like all the ways that we are being manipulated all the time to believe certain things, to want certain things, to spend our money on certain things. You were mentioning all the money and time it took to do your nails and hair and eyelashes. And I'm like, and unfortunately, I feel like that very disproportionately affects women, right? Like men aren't like, I need to go get my nails done. I need to go like get my eyelashes. And so and again, it's not like we're saying don't wear makeup. Like I have makeup on right now. It took me like 5 to 10 minutes to do, but yeah. So it's like, it's one of these things where, and again, I think this year, like the nail salon's closing and all that, I was kind of like, do I really need to be doing this? Is this like a good use of my time? Is this really actually like money, time, all the things that I'm doing to get these beauty treatments or whatever? It's like, is that actually a good way to spend your money and your time? And if not, then what could you be doing instead with that money and time that you would be saving by not being obsessed about like, are my eyelashes long enough or something like that? So, and like I said, I do think this comes with age, also because you're fighting a losing battle when it comes to the way that you look. Like you could look amazing, but you're still going to look a little worse every single month or something because you're going to be aging. But it's like, I don't know. I feel like when you actually get a taste of what life is like when you're focusing on the right things, you get this feeling of like, why do I even care about that other stuff? It's such nonsense. Like none of that ever gave me any sort of satisfaction. there's always more to do. There's always like, well, you still don't look like so-and-so, or your hair is still not nice enough or whatever. And it's just, again, it's that vanity thing where it's like, I don't want to spend my time chasing stuff that either is unattainable, like you said, maybe it's literally fake, or even if it was attainable, so what? Who cares? Like, if I get that, then what? How is my life going to be better? And how am I going to be positively impacted by achieving that outcome? So I don't know. And I think being an entrepreneur, like, I can't remember if we were talking about this before we hit record, but just having to be so much more, you were saying with becoming a mother and having to be so much more specific about how you're spending your time as an entrepreneur. Like, I'm not a mom yet, but as an entrepreneur, my time is so valuable that like, I don't want to spend time doing these things that have no value. Like, I know what I can do with my time, and it's not putting fake eyelashes on, right? Like and I'm not, if you do fake eyelashes, I'm not judging you. I really don't care. I think they look great. But it's just, there's so much more valuable things. And when you start to see what you're capable of, when you put your attention and energy and focus into the things that really matter, it's almost like, why would you even want to eat that? It's almost like if you make this like beautiful homemade, like super high quality dessert and it just is amazing. And then you buy a box of like Costco cookies or something. You're like, ew, this isn't even good. Why do I even want that? So it's the same thing with how we spend our time. Once you've experienced how great life can be when you are actually putting your time and energy and attention into the things that align with your values, then that other stuff is just garbage, right? You're just like, I don't care about it. It really is meaningless. Doesn't mean you never do it. Like, I'll eat a Costco cookie here and there, but it's like, I don't want it. I don't want my life to be surrounded or focused on things that literally mean nothing. And I think the older you get, the more you realize like what actually means stuff to you and what doesn't. But again, when we have these kind of conversations, I'm hoping that even if we're talking to some younger women, that they can kind of like have a little bit of like a come to Jesus moment where they're like, oh my gosh, I've been spending time on stuff I don't even care about. And they can then start to take that journey of figuring out, what do I actually care about? And what is the point of my day-to-day life? And what am I actually doing with my time?
Yeah, I think of it as a journey to finding yourself in a sense. And that's why I always take it back to the menstrual cycle, because it really brings you back. I don't know, like I could go through all the analogies. I played piano growing up, so it's like a metronome, like it kind of brings you into line, whatever you want to say. But when you start to focus on you in a different way, in a deeper way, then everything is different. So I think this is a great place to stop, because I feel like we could keep talking about this, because I have like 100 more questions in my head that I could go through, because this topic is so juicy. Just with all of it really kind of, I feel like it's a symbol for the struggles that we face in our culture that is so hyper-focused on looks and the outward presentation, this kind of display. It's like theater, like you put on this persona and you live in the world, and the social media aspect amplifies it, because not only do you have your own kind of avatar, if you will, but now you have this persona that you have to maintain that isn't real. And I feel like the older generation who didn't grow up with it know that it's not real, because we existed without it. And there's that level of separation. But if you're young and you always grew up and you had yourself in this persona, I would imagine that it feels really real. And for someone to be like, it's not real, would kind of be like, there's no Santa Claus. But it's not real. And there is no Santa Claus.
I mean, if we think about going 50 years, don't tell anybody that. If we think about even 50 years ago, like us talking to each other on a metal box made out of glass and plastic and all of that stuff. And I forget where you're located, but it's certainly not in my neighborhood of North Carolina, Toronto. We're not even in the same country right now. I was going to say, I thought you were in Canada. It's like 50 years ago, people would have been like, that's not real. Like, you can't
even 20 years ago.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I feel like even in my own business in the last like 7 years, so much has changed and things are so different now. So it's like, just knowing that this Zoom meeting that we're having right now, kids now are like, this is normal, like this is school, or like whatever's going on. It's
always been this way. No, it just definitely was not always this way.
Yeah. And it's like, and I think it's nice to have that history of like, I remember when I didn't have a smartphone until I was like 25 or something. Like, I didn't have access to social media on my phone until I think 2010, because that was when I got back from Australia. And I remember that was like, everyone had iPhones. I was like, oh my God, these are amazing. Because Australia is like super behind on technology. So I had like a freaking like push button phone, like a little brick. And I was totally happy without having social media on my phone. So I think, I feel like you and I, your mom, I may be a mom in the future. Like, I think our role, and I don't want to say I know, but I'm pretty confident that part of your role in the business that you're running is to be that light for others, to like help them live in a way that is more true to themselves, is more like nourishing to their bodies and their minds and their spirits. And we just have to keep reminding people that like, that's not real. That's not what your life is meant for. There's more. I think you and I are both in a place where we can say very confidently, I've experienced more and it's way better. And I just want to kind of like help you like walk this way and like, just gently lead you to the light. Cause it's like, I really think it's just going to keep getting worse, especially with the way that technology is moving. And whether or not you have kids, like I think it's our responsibility to actually help prevent the damage that that's going to cause to the next generation. And I don't know what I'm going to do when I have kids. I might be that mom that everybody hates where they don't get their phones until they're driving or something like that. But who knows? That's the long way off. But I just feel like it's our job to really show what life can be like when you are focused on the right things and are focused on what the impact you're having on the world or even the people in your small circle, right? Like you don't have to have a podcast. You don't have to have a platform necessarily to have an impact on the world around you. And I just feel like if we can just turn the dial a little bit for people to start looking at that more, I really think it's going to have a huge ripple effect for generations. And that's one of the reasons why I've transitioned into business coaching, because I just know if I can help other healthcare providers have this influence on their clients, then we can really change the way that, especially women, the way that women are treating their bodies, the way that they're running their lives, the way that they're either putting tons of pressure on themselves or realizing that they don't have to be perfect to be happy. I get super jazzed up about imagining the ripple effect. So it's so awesome to talk to you, Lisa. I feel like it's like we could talk forever. So I will stop.
All right. Well, we didn't get into too much of the business aspect, so maybe that would be a great place to end. You can share a little bit about the work that you're doing currently, what's really jazzing you, how we can get in touch with you for all the ladies who are listening who want to know more about what you do.
Yeah. So right now, my main program that I'm running is called the Nutrition Business Accelerator. It's for anyone who has a business that you're helping people with nutrition, fitness, health, that kind of thing, and wants to be able to do that more effectively and to stand out in a crowded market. It is getting way more popular to be a nutritionist online these days. And there's a lot of stuff you have to do differently to actually be successful and not just like try to get Instagram follows or likes or something. Like internet popularity is not the same thing as having a successful, effective business. So the Nutrition Business Accelerator is the main way that I do that now. And if people are interested, I don't know when this will be coming out, so we may or may not have another round that's enrolling, but I do have a wait list where you can learn more about the program itself. It's at lauraschoenfeld.com/NBA waitlist. So I'll share that link with you, Lisa. And then if people just go to lauraschoenfeld.com, they should be able to check out some of the business coaching stuff. It's different than my health website, which is lauraschoenfeldrd.com, which is where you can learn more about more of the health and mindset and spirituality and all the stuff that we put content out on a regular basis. I have a podcast that Lisa's been on. I have a blog. So there's lots of really cool health related stuff on that website. But if you're interested in the business coaching, that's at lauraschoenfeld.com.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of the future, I mean, current craziness notwithstanding,
when we're out of this mess.
Yeah, whatever happens there. But in general, when I was thinking about the future, a lot really shifted for me, as I mentioned, when I had children. And what the way, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but the way that I felt was like the round peg in the square hole. Like I felt like, because I had a job, this was something in terms of all of the great work that I do now was more of something on the side that I had never really thought could be a true business and a way for me to contribute to my family financially. But when I had children, it's like all of those plans I had of getting a good, 9 to 5 situation. So it didn't work for me, I should say, at the time with children, because children don't work on a schedule like that. And everything was very different. And so I think a lot of women find themselves wanting to create a really fulfilling career because of the desire to contribute to the world, but also at the same time often really need that flexibility when you're a mom, when you have kids and you're trying to do all the things, because you kind of like, you can do a lot of work towards your business, but you can't always do that in a structured kind of way. And so I love that you're helping business women to sort this out, because that's really what I see for the future, us really wanting that control, that creative control of what we're doing, as well as that flexibility to kind of fit it in a way that makes sense for our families.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's been on my mind a lot this year, as far as like, okay, if we are going to have kids, the way that I'm running my business right now I can't do it. I just know, like, I know I will literally crumble if I try to do it the way I was doing it before. So I had to make some tough decisions around getting rid of offers and really honing in on like it's called an ascension model, like one way to serve a client. And it's made a huge difference in not only the income I can make, but also the amount of time I need to spend and the way I can hire people to get help and all of that. And I think it's really awesome to imagine all these women having businesses that don't prevent them from being a fully engaged mother, but also allow them to either contribute to their family's income or be the primary breadwinner. Like, I'm sure my husband wouldn't be upset for me to share that I make the most money in our relationship. And so if we have kids, I'm not quitting my job. Like, I'm not, letting go of that. So if I do want to be a mom, I want it to be something that I can be the best mom I can be and be the best business owner I can be. And I love helping. I don't just work with women, but I just happen to attract almost pretty much all women because I just really love the concept of, first of all, having all these really educated, differently thinking health experts that are then going out and really changing the world and having the kind of conversations that we're having with their clients or with other practitioners. And then also allowing them to have that financial and time freedom so that they can be fully engaged and present in their life with their family while also running a really successful business. So I'm excited to see, I think this year has really opened up a lot of opportunities for people to realize what's possible because everyone was forced online. So it's just really cool to think like, maybe this will be a great opportunity for women to be able to participate equally in the workforce, but also be the moms they want to be and not have to choose between one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you said participate equally, it made me think of this, my experience. And I think we'll finally end here because we could talk all day.
It's another podcast topic.
Totally. We'll just throw in a few more. But one of the things that occurred to me when I was kind of going through this experience of trying to kind of fit into this workforce that was created for and by men based on their circadian rhythm and the fact that they don't necessarily have to leave the workplace and come back when they have children, things like that, that it's not, I don't see the future as women being equal to men. I feel the future being women being kind of standing up straight in our cyclical nature with cycles, menstrual cycles, but also cycles of life where you go through the phase of having children and being in this reproductive phase with littles. And then as they grow older and like all of that. So I'm not trying to be equal to a man in the sense of, that traditional kind of feminist sense. It's more like, no, I'm just going to be a woman and I'm going to figure out what life is going to look like for me because I'm not the same as you guys. I've got different responsibilities, requirements, and obviously a lot of different challenges with time. So anyways, this is, I guess, for all the listeners, probably the first podcast episode ever that we've gone into a little bit of the business side. But I know many of you who are listening do have businesses in whatever way, shape, or form, or planning to be mothers at some point, and kind of having these thoughts and thinking about it. So I'm glad that we dabbled into it a little bit, and I'm sure that your podcast deals with more of this. So for a lot, more of the business discussions and these really fun and interesting and informative conversations, definitely will link to your podcast. And what is it? Is it still called
It's the Fed and Fearless podcast. It's still called that. We'll see if I change the name in the future. I launched it almost a year ago, actually. It'll be a year in like a month, with the thinking that I was going to be focusing on health stuff. And then this year happened and I really switched over. And now I'm like, do people want to hear about business? So I'll like pepper it in there. So I have no idea what's happening with like my blog and my podcast and stuff, but I'm still cranking out the content over there if people want to check it out.
All right. Sounds good, Laura. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/338. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Laura as much as I did. I love where we went with this podcast and what we talked about. It's such an interesting trend to see how much things can change in a short period of time. So when I first jumped on the scene, I was learning about fertility awareness and was starting to teach women about it. I mean, it was nearly 20 years ago and there was no social media. There was certainly still a lot of media influence. And I certainly remember growing up with magazines and seeing these models, and I didn't understand airbrushing and I didn't understand all that kind of stuff. So I remember thinking like, oh man, they just don't have any pores, and thinking that my skin looked weird because I'm a human and I have pores. And I didn't know that they airbrushed their legs and stuff. So you'd see them with these little stick legs, and I was a beanpole growing up, but I would still look down at my womanly legs and think that there was something different from me because I didn't have these like literally like pole legs like the women on the magazine covers. And I didn't know that they were, in some cases fully like erasing a part of the leg and stuff like that before they put them on the cover. I know that now, and I understand airbrushing and I understand all that kind of stuff. But obviously I didn't understand that as a young woman. In today's world, it's so different with media influences. And I don't know that everybody realizes, like maybe they do, but I don't know if really young people, like teenagers, and I don't know. So you tell me. I just don't know if they realize how much of an influence the people who you follow can be. And one way I think about that is how different people's feeds could be. And I don't know if people are really cognizant. So when I was growing up, it was like, you didn't have media tailored to you. You just had the same media everybody else had. So whatever was on the TV was what was on the TV. Certainly you can cultivate a different approach, but it just wasn't as customizable. But now, if you look at your social media feeds, I mean, one person can be getting one completely different set of information to another, literally just based on the people that you follow. So you can think about it from a dietary perspective. If you follow a certain type of diet and you follow 10, 20 people that specifically, exclusively talk about that particular type of diet, then you're getting like one very specific set of information and you're not getting a different type of information. If you follow a certain type of exercise and fitness person, or a certain type of exercise and fitness strategy, then you could be following 10, 20, 30 people who specifically follow that particular exercise strategy, and you're not following people who are not doing that. And I just wonder if people realize how specific that their experience can be on social media based on their preferences, and how you can get a very narrow view of something because you could really be looking at like one perspective to the exclusion of all else. And so I just say that because I often think about that as very interesting. So particularly if you have challenges with your mindset around eating, but everyone you follow is really, really skinny, super, fitness, and like kind of promoting a certain way of thinking about things, you may or may not realize how that could be affecting you. So in today's day and age, sometimes when you're struggling with certain things or you're wanting to make a change, literally, sometimes one of the first things you got to do is either totally ditch the technology altogether, which is less practical. I think you can hear my kids in the background, maybe. If so, welcome, they're there. But anyways, so sometimes one of the first aspects of your strategy is actually to like unfollow people or to mute people, or to like, even if you don't want to unfollow them, but maybe unfollow but don't like, but still like them, or even just get rid of like certain people. But sometimes when you're trying to make a change and you're wanting to do something a little bit differently, it's important to actually think about who you're following and and be a little bit selective. And certainly if there are people who you follow who kind of make you feel bad about yourself, people who always look perfect makeup, really whatever it is, even if it's just their message, whatever, it's okay to just like unfollow or mute or whatever you need to do so that you can really cultivate that mindset. Because I like I said, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm very curious as to how aware people are of how tailored their feeds are to them. So like if you had my feed for a week, you would be seeing a lot of different stuff probably than if you had someone else's feed. Like you take 10 different people's social media feeds and just based on their own interests and where they're at this point in their life, you could have 10 totally different experiences. And I often wonder if people take a moment to reflect on how much that kind of stuff can affect your choices. So anyways, that's like one little part of what we talked about today, but certainly a fascinating aspect of it. And I hope you got as much out of our conversation as I did. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the show and of course for supporting Fertility Friday. I see all of you tagging me on social media, sharing episodes with your friends, and I hear so much great feedback. My doctor referred me to you. My healthcare provider referred me to your book, and my sister told me about your podcast. And so I really, really do appreciate all of you as part of the Fertility Friday community, sharing and really kind of shouting from the rooftops about fertility awareness. That's really how we're going to raise awareness and change the world. In my opinion, it's literally just about getting started and just going and doing things. It's not about waiting for the government or waiting for our education system to think it's important. It's just about us as women, as people who are concerned about the menstrual cycle and want to just gain that power and control over our own bodies to just keep spreading the word. So thank you so much for being a part of that. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.